The internet. It's woven into just about every part of our lives now, isn't it? Powering everything, our homes, businesses, how we connect.
Absolutely. But there's this constant storm brewing just beneath the surface.
Right. Cybercrime. It's rampant, pervasive, and based on the sources we're diving into today, it goes unpunished way more often than you'd think.
That's definitely the picture we got.
Yeah.
We've gone through quite a stack of material for this, including insights from Roger A. Grimes' framework in Taming the Hacking Storm, and also some really detailed stuff on how attackers and the good guys, the ethical hackers, find targets, like from reconnaissance for ethical hackers.
So our mission today is really to unpack the roots of this hacking storm,
Yeah.
Understand how attackers and defenders using similar techniques scout for weaknesses.
And then explore this pretty bold plan, maybe even revolutionary, to try and fundamentally secure the internet.
And crucially, look at the massive challenges. I mean, the hurdles to actually making something like that happen.
Exactly. By the end of this deep dive, you should have a much clearer view of the sheer scale of cybercrime. And fair warning, it is pretty eye-opening.
And hopefully a new perspective on what it might actually take to build a genuinely secure digital world.
Yeah, what that really looks like.
Okay, let's start then. Grappling with the problem itself, the scale of this cyberstorm.
The picture painted by the sources is, well, frankly, it's quite bleak. Internet crime isn't just common. It's happening at a scale that just dwarfs most real-world crime stats.
We're talking billions, potentially trillions, soon in costs every year.
That's the trajectory. And it hits nearly every part of modern life.
And you mentioned it's not just attacks, but like a huge amount of just general activity online might be hostile.
Conservatively, yeah. The sources estimate, maybe at least a third of all internet traffic is just rogue bots.
A third? Wow.
And that's before you add in all the malicious emails, the spam messages, the phishing attempts. It becomes clear that a really substantial chunk of what's flying around online is, well, bad news.
Nearly 1/3 from bots, and something like 93% of those bots look malicious. That's staggering.
It is. And it kind of lines up with our own experiences, doesn't it?
Yeah, totally. Like unwanted text messages.
Oh, incredibly common. The sources echo what we all feel, see. You probably get more suspicious texts, those fake delivery alerts or whatever, than real ones these days.
Yeah, I barely answer unknown numbers anymore.
It's gotten to that point. People just ignore unknown calls, avoid clicking links, which is sad, but it's, a rational response to the threat environment.
And phishing, the classic digital con game, still a major threat.
Remains a huge attack vector. One UK survey put it at like 83% of incidents involved phishing. Another report, 60%.
And phishing often leads straight to stealing logins, right? Credential abuse.
Precisely. That's one of the biggest downstream problems. Attackers constantly trying to get hold of valid usernames and passwords.
The scale there is nuts, too, I read.
It's immense. Sources mention millions of these credential abuse attacks against customers monthly. Microsoft apparently blocks billions of identity attacks daily.
Billions. Daily.
Yeah. And another provider saw like 61 billion password attack attempts in just 18 months.
It's just an unbelievable volume. And the tools attackers use, like malware, they're constantly changing.
Oh, far from static. Malware evolves constantly. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of new or significantly tweaked malware programs popping up every single day.
Hundreds of thousands a day.
Yep, there are over 1 billion unique malware signatures identified now. Just for context, Microsoft detected 775 million emails with malware in just 1 year.
So, okay. We're drowning in malicious traffic, fake messages, login attempts, evolving malware. We've known about this for decades, spent billions. Why aren't we winning?
Well, the sources point to a really stubborn challenge. The top two ways attackers get in have basically stayed the same for decades.
Which are?
Social engineering, tricking people and exploiting unpatched software or firmware, known vulnerabilities.
So despite everything, those are still the main ways in.
They continue to be the most effective entry points year after year.
It's like trying to secure a castle, but the attackers keep using the same unlocked back gate or just talking the guards into letting them in.
That's a really apt analogy. And the digital world makes it worse because of speed.
How so?
An organization might take days, even weeks, to test and roll out a patch for a vulnerability, right? Even a critical one.
Sure, testing takes time.
Meanwhile, a hacker finds out about that vulnerability, maybe just by reverse engineering the patch itself.
Yeah.
And they can cook up a working exploit in like minutes or hours.
So the defenders are always playing catch up.
Constantly. And then there's the issue of catching them. Even if you know who attacked you, good luck prosecuting across borders.
Ah, the international aspect.
Which leads right to what the sources identify as the absolute core issue fueling this whole hacking storm.
Okay, what's that?
Pervasive anonymity. It's just too easy for criminals online to completely hide who they really are.
They can pretend to be anyone, any company.
Exactly. And victims, you and me, we have no reliable way to verify who we're actually dealing with. This lack of verifiable identity is like the fundamental root enabler for most online crime.
Okay. So anonymity is the criminal's best friend online. It's their shield and their sword.
You could say that?
So to really counter this, whether you're defending or you're an ethical hacker trying to think like an attacker, you first need to understand how they systematically find those weaknesses.
Right. Which brings us to that crucial first step, reconnaissance.
Info gathering.
It's the foundation.
Yeah.
For malicious attackers and for ethical hackers, it's all about gathering as much information as possible about a target before you try anything else.
The huge difference being permission, obviously.
Absolutely critical. Ethical hackers have explicit legal permission. They have a defined scope. Malicious actors, well, they don't.
But the techniques might be similar. Ethical hackers need to think like the bad guys.
Exactly. They adopt that adversary mindset, but within strict legal and ethical boundaries. The goal is finding the holes before the real attackers do.
And the point of all this info gathering is to map out the attack surface.
Correct. The attack surface is just all the possible points where someone unauthorized could potentially get access. System, network, data, whatever. Good reconnaissance identifies that surface.
And that info helps the organization shrink its own surface.
Ideally, yes. Understand the exposure to reduce it.
So how do they gather this info? The sources mention passive and active methods.
Right. Passive recon is all about collecting publicly available information, stuff that's already out there, without directly poking or prodding the target system.
This is the OSINT stuff, open source intelligence.
Exactly. OSINT.
So like using Google, looking at their website.
That's part of it, but it goes deeper. Think job boards, online forums, social media, company registration databases, public DNS records.
Okay.
You can find employee names, emails, job titles, really useful for targeted phishing later. Org charts, maybe. Even photos or videos people post online can sometimes reveal useful details.
Like what?
Oh, locations, types of equipment they use, maybe even sensitive info accidentally visible on a whiteboard in the background of a photo.
So a lot of this is data that organizations and people are just unintentionally leaking.
That's a huge part of OSINT. Seemingly harmless public posts or records can provide crucial puzzle pieces for an attacker.
Is there a process to OSINT?
Yeah, there's kind of a life cycle. You figure out what you need, you collect the data, you analyze it, turning raw data into actual intelligence.
Yeah.
You record it, and then, importantly, you pivot.
Pivot.
Meaning you use one piece of info you found to find another related piece, like finding an employee name, then searching for their social media, which might reveal more contacts or technical details. It expands the map.
And even doing this passive stuff, ethical hackers might need to stay anonymous?
Often, yes. You want to see their public footprint without tipping them off that you're looking closely.
How do they do that?
Common ways are using VPNs to hide their real IP address,
Yeah.
or more advanced stuff like the Tor network. Yeah, it routes your connection through multiple encrypted layers, different servers run by volunteers, makes it super hard to trace back. There are tools that help route specific recon activities through TOR or proxies.
Okay, so basic searching, social media. What about using search engines in more advanced ways?
Definitely.
Yeah.
There's this technique called Google dorking.
Dorking.
Yeah, it's using advanced search operators in Google, like filetype.pds or inurl.login, to find sensitive stuff that maybe shouldn't be public. Login pages, internal documents, configuration files left open.
Ah, finding things that aren't supposed to be indexed but are.
Exactly. And then there are specialized search engines, too. Not like Google.
How are they different?
Tools like Shodan or Senses, they don't index web pages. They scan the internet looking for connected devices, infrastructure.
Like servers, routers, IoT things?
Precisely. They find open ports on those devices, what software is running, device types, where they are geographically, sometimes even known vulnerabilities or default passwords. It's like getting a technical blueprint of their internet-facing stuff.
That sounds incredibly useful for an attacker.
Or an ethical hacker mapping the perimeter. Understanding the domain and DNS setup is also key.
Like looking up who owns the domain.
Yeah. WHOIS databases can sometimes give you ownership details, contact info, though privacy services often hide that now. But subdomain finding or enumeration is huge.
Subdomains like mail.company.com.
Right. Or vpn.company.com, dev.company.com. Companies often have tons of these, not always linked for the main site. Each one is another potential entry point, maybe with weaker security.
Or test systems connected internally.
Could be. So finding those subdomains really expands the attack surface.
Are there automated tools for that?
Oh yeah, tools like Sublist3, Amass, the Harvester,
Yeah.
they automate searching for these across various sources.
And digging into the DNS records themselves.
Also crucial, tools like nslookup or dncenum help map out their network structure from DNS. Sometimes you find misconfigured servers that allow something called a zone transfer. It's where the DNS server basically hands over its entire list of domain names and IPs to anyone who asks. Like giving an attacker the full map. It shouldn't happen, but it does.
Okay, what about the website itself? Obviously a prime target.
Yeah, absolutely. Recon on the website involves identifying the technologies used. What web server? Apache, Jinx, what CMS, WordPress, Drupal, what programming languages, plugins.
Why does that matter?
Because specific versions of software often have known public vulnerabilities. Tools like WhatWeb can automate identifying the tech stack.
And finding hidden stuff on the site.
That's directory enumeration, using tools like GoBuster or DIRB to blast the site with common file and directory names, trying to find things that aren't linked publicly.
Like admin panels or backup files.
Exactly. Config files, old code, anything sensitive that wasn't meant to be web accessible. Understanding common web vulns, like the OWASP top 10 list, helps guide this search.
Okay, that's passive recon. Gathering public info without touching the target directly. What about active recon? That sounds riskier.
It is. Active reconnaissance means you're directly interacting with, probing, the target systems. So, yeah, much higher chance of being detected.
What kind of techniques does that involve?
Things like host discovery, sending out probes, like pings, to see which IP addresses on a network are actually alive and responding, though pings can often be blocked.
So finding live machines and then scanning them.
Network scanning is absolutely central to active recon. Nmap is the king here. It's a super powerful scanner.
What does Nmap find?
It probes the target machines to see which network ports are open, what services are running on those ports, like web servers, mail servers, databases, and often it can even guess the operating system.
And you'd scan all the ports.
A thorough scan checks all 65,535 possible TCP ports, yeah. Sometimes useful services hide on weird, high-numbered ports that defenders might overlook.
And even if the ethical hacker has permission to scan, they might still try to be sneaky about it.
Right, to make the test realistic. They might use evasion techniques, like spoofing their source IP or MAC address, or fragmenting the scan packets to try and slide past intrusion detection systems.
Okay, so active recon finds live hosts, open ports, running services. Then what? Look for known weaknesses.
Exactly. That's where automated vulnerability scanners come in. Tools like Nessus or the open source OpenVAS.
How do they work?
They basically check the versions of software and services found during the scan against huge databases of known vulnerabilities. It automates finding low-hanging fruit.
But they're not perfect.
Definitely not. It's crucial for the ethical hacker to manually verify the findings. Scanners can generate false positives reporting a vuln that isn't actually there.
Or miss things.
Yeah, false negatives, failing to find a real vulnerability that is there. So manual checks are key. And they use the CVSS score, Common Vulnerability Scoring System, to rate how severe each found vulnerability is. Helps prioritize.
What about wireless? Wi-Fi seems like an obvious way in.
For sure. Wireless signals intelligence, SIGINT, is part of the attack surface. Ethical hackers use portable setups, maybe a Raspberry Pi with special Wi-Fi cards,
To sniff out networks.
to gather info on nearby access points, signal strength, security type WPA2, WPA3, the channel, the MT address of the access point manufacturer. It all helps map the wireless attack surface and find potential weaknesses.
So if you're on the defensive side, how do you even spot all this recon activity? It sounds pretty stealthy sometimes.
Defenders use monitoring tools. Network protocol analyzers like Wireshark are fundamental. They let you capture and inspect raw network traffic.
Looking for patterns.
Yeah, unusual scanning patterns, weird probes, traffic spikes from unknown sources, things that might indicate someone is mapping your network.
Are there bigger platforms that help?
Sure. Things like Security Onion. It's an integrated platform with multiple tools for network security monitoring, intrusion detection, log analysis. It helps correlate data from different places to spot suspicious activity, including reconnaissance, more easily.
Okay. So we've got this pervasive damaging cybercrime problem, largely fueled by anonymity. And now we see how attackers, or ethical hackers, systematically map out weaknesses using reconnaissance.
The clear picture of the threat and how it starts.
If our current ways of dealing with this aren't enough, what's the alternative? Let's get into this bold plan you mentioned, securing the internet with a trust framework.
Right. This comes from Roger A. Grimes' work, as explored in the sources. It's a fundamentally different approach. Instead of just reacting, it tries to tackle that root cause we talked about, the lack of verifiable identity and trust online.
So the vision is what? An internet where you can actually know who you're talking to.
Essentially, yes, high trust identity ecosystem. The core idea is if you can reliably verify the identity of the person or system you're interacting with, and the device they're using, and the network they're on, and the application they're running.
Then a whole lot of attacks just don't work anymore.
Exactly. It dramatically cuts down the effectiveness of attacks based on deception, spoofing, anonymity, which, as we saw, are the most common ones.
Okay, sounds ambitious. What are the building blocks, the pillars of this framework?
There are four main interconnected pillars. First, verified user identity.
Going beyond just usernames and passwords.
Way beyond. It means strong identity proofing, potentially linking online identities back to some form of real-world ID through a secure process.
Like prove you are who you say you are, once.
Sort of. You'd have one strongly verified core identity, but maybe different personas linked to it for different contexts, work, personal shopping, whatever.
What about privacy? That sounds concerning.
Huge consideration. So the framework includes an identity attribute querying service. The idea is a site could ask, is this person over 21? Or does this person work for company X? And get a yes-no answer without revealing your full name or other details. Limited disclosure.
Okay, that helps. Verified identity is pillar one. What's two?
Pillar two. Trusted devices. This is about ensuring the device itself, your computer, your phone, hasn't been tampered with. Hardware and firmware integrity.
Oh.
It relies on tech, like protected memory, secure boot processes that check the OS and software as it starts up, often using a special security chip, like a TPM Trusted Platform module.
So the device proves it's trustworthy.
Basically, yes.
Yes.
Devices get assigned trust assurance levels based on their verified security state. Standards from groups like the Trusted Computing Group, OS features like hardware virtual machines for isolation, they all play a role here.
Okay, so I need to prove who I am, and my device needs to prove it's clean. What's next?
Pillar three, trusted networks. The network you're connecting from also needs to prove its trustworthiness.
How does the network prove that?
By enforcing compliance policies, ensuring devices connecting to it meet certain security standards, like being fully patched, running antivirus, etc. Being on a verified compliant network adds another layer of trust.
Sounds like zero trust architecture principles.
Very much aligned with zero trust. Don't inherently trust anything just because it's inside. Networks would also get trust assurance levels based on their compliance and maybe their history.
Got it. Identity, device, network. What's the fourth pillar?
Fourth is trusted applications, the actual software you're running.
How do you trust an application?
Programs would need to be cryptographically signed by a trusted authority, proving who made them and that they haven't been altered. They'd need to be built using secure coding practices and may be verified by some central process. Think of it like a super strict global app store model.
Okay. And what about stopping things like session hijacking, stealing cookies?
The framework proposes security-bounded cookies. These aren't just tied to your session, they're cryptographically linked to your verified identity and your trusted device. So even if an attacker steals the cookie, it's useless on their machine.
Wow. Okay, that's a lot of interconnected trust. How does it all actually work together to decide if, say, my connection to a website should be allowed?
That's the job of the central mechanism, the Trust Assurance Service, or TAS.
TAS.
It would have two parts, a global TS and a local TS. The global TS would be like a new kind of distributed internet service, maybe hierarchical like DNS.
But instead of names to addresses.
It maintains constantly updated block lists, lists of identities, devices, networks, applications that are known to be compromised or malicious. Building and maintaining this globally would require huge international cooperation. Unprecedented, really.
Okay, that's the global blacklist. What about the local TAS?
That lives on your device, or maybe your local network gateway. It's constantly evaluating the trust level of everything trying to connect in or out.
Based on what?
Based on security policies you or your organization set, and by checking things against the global TAS reputation lists. Crucially, any interaction would need to meet a minimum required trust assurance level to even happen.
And if it doesn't meet the level?
Deny. The default action, if trust can't be verified to the required level, is to block the connection or interaction entirely.
Deny by default. That is a fundamental shift from today's allow unless known bad internet.
It really is.
Yeah.
The goal is to push this complex trust decision-making down into the infrastructure, make it automatic based on verifiable data, ideally hidden from the average user most of the time. But the underlying principle is don't trust unless verified. So, based on the modeling and the sources, how much of a dent would this actually make in the attacks we see? The modeling was pretty optimistic, especially for the common stuff. It suggested things like eavesdropping, man-in-the-middle attacks, many denial of service types could be substantially mitigated, like maybe 99% reduction.
99%.
And, crucially, spoofing and social engineering, the attacks that really rely on deception and anonymity, the modeling suggested substantial mitigation there too, perhaps 70–90%.
Just stopping those would be huge. That's most of the problem volume right there.
Exactly. That's the core argument. Other things like exploiting software vulns because of trusted device apps, impersonation, malware, tampering, even some info leaks, thanks to that attribute query idea, could see partial mitigation, maybe around 50%.
Are there attacks it wouldn't really help with?
Yeah, it's not a silver bullet. The
Yep.
modeling showed it wouldn't significantly stop problems caused by legitimate, authorized users making mistakes, human error, misconfigurations. That's still a huge source of breaches, maybe 95% plus not prevented by this.
Okay.
And it wouldn't do much against things like side-channel attacks, exploiting physical hardware characteristics, or direct physical attacks on servers or cables.
So it's not perfect, but the argument is it tackles the biggest, most frequent types of cybercrime head on.
That's the argument presented. Even with limitations, drastically cutting the success rate of the most popular attack methods could fundamentally reshape the security landscape.
Okay, it's a compelling vision. A high-trust internet,
Yeah.
verified identities, devices, networks, apps, fending off the common stuff.
Yeah.
But if it's potentially so good, why haven't we done it? Which brings us to the fourth part, the massive challenges. The road ahead, or maybe the brick wall ahead?
The hurdles are definitely significant
Yeah.
across technical, social, and political domains. First off, just the sheer technical complexity.
Building it.
Building and maintaining a seamless global system like this, one that hides all that complexity from billions of users, but is still robust and secure, that's an engineering challenge on a scale we've probably never seen.
Then people might just not want it. User resistance.
Very likely. People are used to the current ease, the anonymity, however flawed. Systems requiring stronger ID checks, maybe adding delays, feeling more intrusive, could face huge pushback. Convenience often wins.
That sounds like the tragedy of the commons.
It connects directly to that classic problem, like individuals overgrazing public land because it benefits them personally, even if it harms the resource for everyone long term.
Individual desire for easy access and anonymity outweighs the collective good of security.
Often, yes. Getting billions of users, hundreds of countries, thousands of companies to collectively prioritize security over individual convenience or perceived freedom. That's a monumental challenge.
Then getting everyone, all the countries and companies, to even agree to try.
That might be the biggest hurdle of all. The organizational and political challenges are just immense. This framework requires global agreement, consistent participation from pretty much everyone.
How do you get that level of consensus?
That is perhaps the single largest obstacle. It requires a level of global cooperation we rarely achieve on anything.
It sounds like we'd need international treaties, things like that.
Absolutely. The sources stress the need for enforceable international agreements on cybercrime, like the ongoing efforts for a UN cybercrime convention, just to make cross-border prosecution feasible. Right now, it's incredibly difficult.
And standards bodies would be critical.
Essential. Groups like the IETF, W3C, and especially NIST in the U.S., whose security standards often become global benchmarks they'd need to develop and promote all the technical standards for how identity is verified, how device trust is measured, and so on.
The sources mentioned an Internet Security Global Alliance.
Yeah, some kind of coordinating body is envisioned as necessary to drive this.
And even separate from this huge framework, the sources say we still need to get better at the basics.
Definitely. Secure coding is still a fundamental gap. Many programmers just aren't taught secure practices properly. It needs to be mandatory in education, a required job skill.
Using safer languages?
That would help massively. Using memory-safe languages like Python, C#, Rust, Go could just eliminate whole categories of common vulnerabilities right at the source code level.
And patching, we still need to get faster.
Much faster. The number of new vulnerabilities found is exploding. Organizations need to patch way faster than attackers can weaponize those flaws. Prioritizing based on active exploitation helps.
Does the cloud help with patching?
The sources note it does, yeah.
Hmm.
Vendors can often patch their cloud software much more quickly and universally than waiting for every customer to patch on-premise systems.
Okay, let's circle back to that identity piece. This whole framework, built on verifiable identity, it raises huge privacy flags, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And it's probably the most complex ethical and social knot to untangle here. There's no easy answer.
The worry being surveillance.
Exactly. Moving to verifiable online ID inevitably raises valid fears about increased surveillance potential by governments, by big corporations. Who holds that identity data? How is it protected? How is it used?
The framework mentioned an attempted anonymity ID?
Yeah, the idea is you could maybe opt for the current level of anonymity, but the sources kind of imply that if you don't participate in the high trust system, you might just stand out more, become more suspicious by default.
So it's a massive trade-off. More security, potentially much less privacy or anonymity.
That's the fundamental societal question this framework forces us to confront. What balance do we want? What are we willing to give up for more security?
So it sounds like while the technical ideas for a more secure internet might be there or getting there, the biggest remaining hurdle isn't really technical at all.
It seems that way. It's about influencing people. Enough governments, companies, and crucially billions of individual users to accept and actually implement such a profound change to how the internet fundamentally works.
The human and political will.
That seems to be the core challenge, yeah.
Yeah.
Building the infrastructure, adopting the behaviors.
Okay, so we've taken quite a journey today. A deep dive into the, frankly, overwhelming reality of cybercrime.
Yeah, the scale is hard to ignore.
Then we explored the systematic ways attackers and ethical hackers scout for vulnerabilities using reconnaissance, passive and active.
Mapping the territory before the attack.
And then we unpacked this potentially revolutionary framework securing the internet through a high-trust ecosystem, verifying identities, devices, networks, applications.
A bold vision, tackling the root cause of anonymity.
We saw its potential promise, significantly mitigating the most common attacks,
Yeah.
but also the daunting challenges, technical, social, political.
And forcing that difficult conversation about privacy versus security.
Right. The internet's pervasive anonymity enables so much of the crime we talked about. But fixing it, according to this framework, seems to require a level of transparency and verifiable trust that's just fundamentally different from the internet we know.
And maybe one that many people would find uncomfortable or even unacceptable.
So here's a final provocative thought for you, the listener, to maybe mull over as you go about your online life today.
If achieving a significantly more secure internet really does require this kind of high-trust ecosystem, where your identity, your devices, your networks, the apps you use are all continuously verified, are you personally ready for that level of transparency?
What are the trade-offs you'd be willing to make, or perhaps absolutely not willing to make, for the sake of greater digital safety, not just for yourself, but for everyone?